In previous top 10 lists, the criteria for deciding on the ships in my list was primarily based on my own opinions, such as how much I personally like their designs, interiors, etc., how much I know about them and talk about them, and how much they have personally impacted me as a ship enthusiast. While our own opinions have definitely impacted our picks, I mean, it's almost impossible, this time around, me and my friend Steven have put together a proper criteria, making sure we show a little bit of love for every era of shipbuilding.
1. No multiple ships of the same class, simply because we want to represent as many different ships as possible in the small amount of spots available. So while both Lusitania and Mauretania, for example, are incredible ships in their own right, in the end they are the same general design and we want to represent a variety of different ships in our list. 2. Needs to have had a long and/or impactful career, since the history and impact of an ocean liner is just as important as their aesthetics, innovations, among other things. Even more important in some cases, as you will see later. 3. It needs to have been innovative for its time. Because of the fact that there have been so many ocean liners throughout history, how innovative they were for their time plays an incredibly important part in how they impacted the world of shipbuilding and likewise how they are viewed even today. 4. It needs to be visually appealing to us. Like Ryder said, this is our opinion in the end.
Keep in mind that, while we tried to include ocean liners that follow all of these criteria as much as possible, it's only natural that some, if not all, don't perfectly align with all of these criteria. It doesn't really matter since this is just a silly YouTube video, but just keep this in mind because it might seem a little jarring when we get to some of our picks.
With that out of the way, now we can begin.
This wouldn't be the first time the United States would make the 10th spot on a top 10 list of mine. For the time, the SS United States was and still is an absolute triumph of an ocean liner. Designed by Francis Gibbs, one of the most prolific designers of his day, he made a ship that oozed innovation and detail at every corner. I couldn't possibly talk about every innovation this ship introduced to the table. Her lightweight hull combined with powerful turbine engines, sleek profile designed to cut cleanly through the waves, and propeller design so genius that it was kept a secret from the world for a good while, all culminated to create the fastest ocean liner of all time. As a matter of fact, the United States still holds the speed record for the fastest ocean liner, with a transatlantic crossing time of just 3 days and 12 hours at a top speed of 38 knots. For reference, the top speed of the previous holder, Queen Mary, was just under 31 knots. The reason, however, why the United States is so low on this list comes from its interior design, which is...
While the SS United States had an objectively beautiful exterior, the same cannot be said for its interior, for the most part. A lot of this was due to the fact that the interior had to be completely fireproof, as ordered by the US Navy. Likewise, its interiors couldn't be overly complicated due to the fact that it needed to be quickly converted into a troop ship if the need arose. Although there were still beautiful aspects of the interior such as the sculptural pieces and brass lining of the dining room and some of the furnishings in the suites, but other than that, the aesthetics are generally not to our taste.
We generally prefer the interiors of ocean liners of the Edwardian era, which featured far more ornate and diverse styling in their most prominent spaces. While modern for the time, the Art Deco era of ocean liner interiors simply doesn't hold up as well by today's standards.
Besides this aesthetic flaw, we simply cannot deny how impressive and innovative this ship was for the time, and even today, it still remains an absolute triumph in the history of ocean liner design.
From here on out, none of the ships on our list necessarily have any glaring flaws like the United States, but that doesn't mean that the higher ranking ships on our list don't do certain things better. The SS Kaiser Wilhelm de Grosse is known for being one of the first superliners. Built by A.G. Volkenstetten in 1896, she made her maiden voyage on September 19, 1897, introducing a multitude of innovations that would become the standard for ocean liners to come. One of these innovations were powerful triple expansion reciprocating engines, capable of propelling the ship to a top speed of around 21 to 22 knots, winning her the blue ribbon until the SS Deutschland would take it in 1900. Kaiser Wilhelm de Grosse was the first four-funneled liner, setting a nearly 2-decade-long trend in ocean liner design that would be used to represent the pinnacle of comfort, speed, and luxury. This idea of comfort and luxury is perfectly represented in her absolutely peak Edwardian interiors, which are some of our favorites.
This ship's interiors were very unique as they followed a consistent design throughout all of the spaces, that being the Baroque Revival style, as compared to other ocean liners of the time, which tended to feature a variety of different interior styles. This was due to the fact that the ship only had one interior designer, that being Johann Puck. The interiors are beautiful and feature rich ornamentation and furnishings that blend together to create exquisite public spaces and comfortable cabins. Some examples of these include the two-story dining room capped with a glass ceiling, the first-class reading and writing room with its blue seating and decorative floral panels, and the first-class smoking room with its beautiful wooden paneling and stained glass ceiling.
We're talking a lot about the ship's interiors, but it's also notable to mention just how inviting her exterior looks. I've mentioned this before, but we are big fans of the dozens of cow vents that clutter up around the funnels on early ocean liners, which seems kinda strange, but things like that go a long way in making a ship seem more appealing. It's definitely an aesthetic preference, and I've heard a lot of people say that they find the clutter somewhat of an eyesore. Either way though, it's hard to deny just how much of a great liner the Kaiser Wilhelm de Grosse was, and it's unfortunate the ship was overshadowed so quickly by the ever-expanding standards of ocean liner design. The SS Rex, along with their running mate, the SS Conte de Savoia, were some of the few Italian liners that gained traction as ocean liners, most likely due to the ship's publicity campaigns. Built by Ansaldo & Co. in 1931, the Rex was the answer to Germany and France's superliners, and while never quite reaching the height of those liners, definitely still deserves a place in the history books alongside some of the greats of that era. With their quad-steam turbine engines, the Rex was able to be pushed towards a maximum speed of around 29 to 30 knots, which was very impressive for the time, even winning her the Blue Ribbon in August of 1933. While we aren't the biggest fans of her forehead of a superstructure, the general profile of the ship is sleek and clean, which really helps to convey a sense of speed. The placement and spacing of her two short funnels creates balance in her profile, and the rather aggressive sheer gives the ship a smart look. The interiors likewise have a lot to like.
If you ever wanted the Titanic's interiors but fascist, then this is the ship for you. Obviously I'm joking, although in reality, many of the interior design choices made by the Rex's designers were inspired by the Olympic class, the most famous of these being the Rex's Grand Staircase. The Rex had beautiful interiors, and its interior design in general was inspired by the classic ocean liners of the early 1900s, which made it extremely unique among the mostly Art Deco interiors of its competitors. This classic interior flair is one of the reasons why this ship specifically appeals to us.
While not as aggressively Edwardian as ocean liners that preceded her, the uniqueness and attention to detail of the Rex earns her a spot on our list. On the topic of fascist ships, we come to the Nazi Germany-owned SS Europa. Built by Wilhelm and Voss shipyards, the ship began construction in 1927, making her main voyage in March of 1930. During this voyage, she captured the Blue Ribbon from her sister Bremen, with an average crossing speed of around 28 knots. In the end, while the two sisters are very similar, we chose Europa because her career was far more interesting in our opinion, having been captured by the Allies in World War II. She then served as the USS Europa, transporting troops until the end of the war, before being handed over to France and converted to the SS Liberté, serving for another 13 years before being scrapped in 1963.
Europa boasted some of the finest interiors that the era had to offer. The ship championed the new Art Deco style of interior design, which gave it a more modern feel and aesthetic compared to some of its contemporaries. Certain elements such as the intricate floor panels and ceiling patterns of the lounge and ballroom, the arches of the second-class dining room, and the beautiful paintings and sculpture work scattered throughout the ship really served to make its beautiful interiors stand out compared to other ships of the day.
The exterior design of Europa is quite nice, with elegant curves along her bow and superstructure that create a beautiful profile all around. All of this culminates in Europa being an incredibly well-rounded design, and we think it well earned a spot on our list. The SS Normandie is probably one of the most visually appealing ocean liners on our list. Normandie began construction in January of 1931, making her main voyage in May of 1935. On this voyage, she would take the Blue Ribbon from the SS Rex during her westbound crossing, and again from herself during her eastbound crossing, averaging a speed of 30 to 31 knots. Her greatest competitor during this time was Cunard's Queen Mary, and they would compete for the blue ribbon throughout the 1930s. It's incredible just how much of a piece of art the ship was from the inside out. The French line's paint scheme bodes perfectly with the ship's sleek curves, with the white of the ship's superstructure almost appearing to melt into the bow as the sheer curves upward to the stem. In general, the Normandie's exterior oozed peak French design, with so much flair and unique character.
The Normandie's interiors are infamous among the ocean liner community for being some of the most opulent and decadent interiors ever seen in ocean liner history, almost to the point where they were a detriment to the ship's career. Every single first-class cabin had a unique design, and all of the public spaces were richly coated in Art Deco ornamentation. For instance, a normal ship would have a decently sized centerpiece wall painting in a public room, but then the Normandie would have 4 wall paintings that were the size of the walls themselves, with 8 crystal chandeliers and 2 marble statues for good measure. Now, while the interior spaces on the Normandie were beautiful, beyond all the glass walls and crystal chandeliers, they created a problem, that being the fact that many passengers felt that the Normandie's decadence was just too overbearing, and that the interior felt more like an art gallery than a set of relaxing public spaces. Despite these problems, we still enjoy some of Normandie's interiors, with our favourite examples being the Grand Salon, the Promenade, the dining room, and some of the first-class suites.
Built by Harland Wolff for the White Star Line, the Oceanic began construction in 1897 and would make her maiden voyage in September of 1899. The ship wouldn't break any speed records though, since White Star Line intended to focus more on size, comfort, and luxury rather than speed.
The Oceanic's interiors are interesting because it was one of the first White Star Line ships to implement the luxury over speed strategy, the first being the SS Cymric. This meant that more emphasis was put on her interior than on the previous ships, and this shows. Spaces such as her dining room and smoking room were lavishly decorated with wooden furnishings, wall paintings, and capped with glass domes. Her first-class lounge was also lavishly decorated and would later inspire the lounges of the Olympic class.
While not particularly groundbreaking for the time, the Oceanic's exterior was a huge step up from previous White Star Liners. It's kinda hard to describe exactly what about the ship is appealing, but I can point out how perfect Oceanic's proportions are, with the long knife-edge bow, perfectly spaced funnels, which, while rather tall, I still quite like, as well as the superstructure, whose proportions bode perfectly with the hull, creating an excellent balance. That's really the best way to describe Oceanic, balance, which may not be as flashy of a title as some of the other ships on the list, but I think that's one of the reasons we like this ship so much, and we think it well earns a spot on our list because of this. The Queen Mary is a ship that, while well deserving of a spot on our list purely because of how much of an icon she is, I wouldn't call it one of our favorites on the list. As a matter of fact, we may even prefer some aspects of previous ships more. In the end, however, it is undeniable just how much of a triumph this ship was. Built by John Brown Company for the Cunard Line, Queen Mary would begin construction in December of 1930, before the project was inevitably halted due to the Great Depression. More than 5 years later, in May of 1936, the ship would finally make her maiden voyage from Southampton to New York. While this voyage wouldn't see Queen Mary taking the blue ribbon from her biggest rival at the time, Normandie, the two ships would eventually find themselves competing in this category throughout their respective careers. The Queen Mary would serve a long and impactful career as compared to the Normandie though, serving as a troop ship during World War II, and even today, the ship lives on as a museum and floating hotel in Long Beach, California. For her time, the Queen Mary was criticized for being too traditional as compared to the innovative and modern designs of the likes of her competitors, not looking too different from ocean liners of old. Even with this, Queen Mary would become one of the most popular ocean liners on the transatlantic route. While yes, this focus on tradition with the ship's exterior may have been a turnoff for the time, but as someone who prefers the Edwardian ocean liners, we really like the Queen Mary style. We especially appreciate the mix of tradition and modern flair to the design, such as the bow's aggressive flare from the stem, the rounded stairway-like forward superstructure taking inspiration from Lusitania, as well as her inviting Cunard orange funnels. The Queen Mary also has an excellent sheer across the full length of the ship, as compared to Normandie, for example, whose sheer was mostly focused towards the bow. Overall, it's just a really appealing design, which may not be too aggressively modern, but it hits the spots that really matter in a ship's design really well.
The Queen Mary's interiors, while likewise criticized for being very conservative for the time compared to her competitors, proved to be more popular among the public due to the lack of the overbearing nature of ships such as the Normandie. The interiors of the ship have some interesting features that we like, such as the large mural in one of the dining rooms that had a crystal model of the ship rigged inside the wall that tracked where the ship was on the ocean. Besides this though, we are not the biggest fans of Queen Mary's interiors, but her exterior makes up for this, and combined with the fact that she is so iconic, earns her a spot on our list.
Now we're getting into the truly amazing ocean liners, ships that we consider to be our personal favorites, but can also be considered well deserving of a spot in the top 3 based on our criteria. The Aquitania was a liner that, while not as revolutionary as previous Cunarders such as Lusitania and Mauretania, was still a great ship in its own right. Built by John Brown Company in December of 1910, the ship would make her maiden voyage in May of 1914, right before the outbreak of World War I. Aquitania would then go on to serve as an armed merchant cruiser, a troop ship, as well as a hospital ship during the Gallipoli campaign. After the war, Aquitania would go on to serve through the 1920s, 30s, and even into World War II and beyond, only being retired in February of 1950, which resulted in an incredibly long career for an Edwardian-era ocean liner. This alone would probably give Aquitania a spot on our list, but what really solidifies her placement in the top 3 is her interiors.
The RMS Aquitania boasted many interior styles, such as Louis XVI, Palladian, Carolinian, and Jacobean. Unlike her running mates, the Aquitania's interior styles varied differently and contrasted a lot more, having rich wood-panelled spaces such as her smoking room, and light and airy places such as her grand staircase. The various interiors were composed of many gorgeous elements such as beautiful glass domes and skylights, detailed ceiling plasterwork, finely varnished wood paneling, and an excellent use of colours combining blues, whites, and golds to create unique and comfortable spaces.
It's also notable to mention just how appealing Aquitania's exteriors are as well. The ship is eye-catching with its uniquely massive and box-like superstructure that really makes it stick out among ocean liners of that era, and even more so later in her career. Overall, there really isn't much I haven't already said that applies to Aquitania, and I would like to save the more detailed analysis for the next 2 ships. Just know, however, that this ship is truly something special, and we think that, because of this, Aquitania has earned a well-deserved spot in our top 3.
The Olympic's exteriors, while not being the most innovative or unique for the time, are one of our favourites simply because of the way that this ship is proportioned. To paraphrase the ship enthusiast from its previous top 10, the knife edge of the bow looks great from every angle and serves to make the rest of the ship pop out. The full-funneled silhouette is iconic and the funnels add colour to the ship. The superstructure molds perfectly into the hull due to the poop deck and forecastle continuing the white line on sea deck, and the fantail is streamlined and not weighed down visually by something such as a superstructure island. All in all, the exterior of the Olympic and the Olympic class in general is one of, if not the most iconic ocean liner designs in history.
I've talked extensively about the Olympic class on my channel, so much so that I feel I'm very qualified in discussing one of the most iconic parts of the ship's design. Olympic's interiors are similar to Aquitania in their diversity and variety. While admittedly not as over-the-top or detailed as their competitors from Cunard or Hamburg America Line, and yeah, there really isn't much that hasn't already been done on other White Star liners. Some spaces, such as the smoking room and lounge, are just scaled up versions of the spaces on previous liners like the Oceanic and Big Four, which really demonstrates how the Olympic was not a revolutionary ship in any way, and yet she still makes it in the 2nd spot on our list. Olympic had an incredibly colorful career, earning her the nickname Old Reliable, so this would probably already be good enough to earn her a spot on this list, but what gives her the edge over previous liners that might have objectively deserved a higher spot than the Olympic is the fact that this is our opinion in the end, and we simply know the most about, care about, and have been impacted the most by the Olympic class, and it would be a disservice for us not to put at least one of the ships in the top 2. So, here we have it, Olympic. A very refined and well-balanced ship inside and out, but of course I'll be focusing on the inside. In our opinion, the Edwardian era of ocean liners has aged much better than later eras of liners, specifically in their interior spaces. Simply put, Edwardian style remains timeless even to this day, with many museums, reproductions of famous spaces, as well as some of the most popular tourist attractions in parts of Europe still remaining popular. Art Deco from that era, on the other hand, even for our favorite liners, tends to age similarly to milk, and you rarely see many talking about their passion for that era of interior design. It is for this reason that we will always prefer ocean liners like Olympic, and we think that, even though not the most innovative or even impressive ocean liner interior design compared to some other ships on this list, the pure balance, variety, and attention to detail, as well as personal bias coming from the fact that I am far more knowledgeable on the Olympic class than really any other class of ships, solidifies Olympic's spot as one of the greatest ocean liners of all time. I've already gone into detail about the ship's interior design and styling multiple times in the past, so to save me from a good hour of rambling, I recommend you go watch those videos. In short though, the Olympic was an absolute triumph of a ship from the inside out, and it is no wonder she remains such an icon in the eyes of so many ship enthusiasts even to this day. Do we really even need to explain ourselves? We knew from the start that Mauretania would have to be the #1 spot. This ship ticks off every box in our criteria to a degree where, while we love every liner on this list and even might prefer the Olympic if we were going purely off a measure of our personal attachment to the ship, it's really not even close. Mauretania was one of the most innovative ships of its time, introducing features that were ahead of their time by a good decade in some cases. The turbine engines being one of the more popular ones, but there are also lesser known aspects of her design, such as her balanced rudder, which wasn't the first of its kind on ocean liner, but Mauretania definitely pioneered its use. There is also the abundance of cowl vents, which, while many today might see them as a nuisance to the passenger experience, we honestly think this adds to the ship's inviting design. Let's talk about that design. Like Olympic, I've talked about Mauretania's exterior design many times now, and there really isn't much I could add that I haven't already said. In the end, it is an incredibly inviting and overall appealing design, which is simply superior to Lusitania. Lusitania doesn't look bad from a design standpoint at all. We actually love it. But there's just small things about her design that overall tips the scale towards the side of Mauretania. The forward superstructure configuration on Mauretania, for example, is way more visually appealing to us as compared to Lusitania. Proper windows replace portholes on Lusitania, which might have been worse off in terms of durability, especially given the ship's knife-edge bow and its tendency to drop in the water. But no one can deny just how much nicer proper windows are. Mauretania's forward superstructure also features an overhanging superstructure design, where each deck overhangs the one below it. Compare this to Lusitania's staircase-like superstructure, where each deck recedes from the one below it. It's small things that add up to overall make Mauretania a far more well-rounded and visually appealing design, whereas Lusitania on the other hand can look a bit confused at times.
Cunard put a lot more resources into the interior of the Lusitania than the Mauretania, which shows considering that Lusitania's interiors are more akin to a palace, whereas Mauretania's are more toned down. However, it is this very aspect of the interior that makes it work for us. In our opinion, Mauretania's interiors feel more warm and inviting, especially due to the large emphasis on wooden paneling and decoration. This can also be seen when looking at the interiors that Mauretania's interior was based off of, those being of French Renaissance chateaux, which were at their core residences, therefore giving Mauretania a more homely feel. As mentioned before, many of Mauretania's interiors have a large emphasis on wood. This creates a gorgeous contrast between the wooden walls and the mainly pale ceilings. Mauretania's interiors also utilize and combined colors in a brilliant way, combining golds and reds with rich browns and stained greys, along with hosting an exquisite set of glass domes and skylights, with iron and gold patterns set into them. The woodwork itself was also exquisite, with carved archways and decorations, especially in the pillars and lintels.
In the end though, what really makes Mauretania such an icon, as well as the objective greatest ocean liner of all time, was her long, profitable, and most importantly, impactful career under Cunard. We've already mentioned some of what made her such an innovative ship, and this went a long way in helping with the public's initial perception of the ship. But the aspects of her design, exterior and interior, helped in keeping Mauretania relevant throughout the 1920s and even into the 1930s. The ship became one of, if not the most beloved ships sailing the transatlantic route, and had grown its own personality. So when the time finally came when the ship was no longer profitable for Cunard, People, including the United States President at the time, Franklin D. Roosevelt, protested for the ship to be saved from the scrapyard. In the end, Mauretania would end up being scrapped, but the fact that so many people put up a fight for the ship to be saved stands as a test to just how much of an impact she had on the industry. You could really make an argument for any ocean liner on this list being deserving of a #1 spot, but in our opinion, there is simply no ship that could measure up to the Mauretania.